Let me pray and ask God to bless this time. So, well, Father, we just bow humbly before you, and we ask that you would help us right now, to all of us, that we would choose to be students, that we would desire to know something that we haven't yet known, that we would look for whatever it is that can speak to us, even this technical stuff, the information, that it would stir in us a desire to do the very best that we could when it comes to what it is that we do with our talent for playing music, but more so the worship that we get to be a part of at Calvary. And so we're grateful, and we ask, Holy Spirit, that you would do a greater thing with this time than we could on our own. We need you. And so as I share these thoughts, I pray that they would be clear, and that everyone here would walk away with something that they've gleaned, and we would just be better for it. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, so as we were talking about doing workshops and throwing around some of the ideas that we had for workshops, it kind of became apparent that I had a little bit more to say on these two subjects than I thought. We talked about maybe bringing someone in to share with us, what they think we should be doing when it comes to the personal mixes, and then dissecting, parts of a song. And so it was interesting, because the more Timmy and I talked about it, we talked to someone else also, it just became obvious that this first one, I wanted to do this, So I'm sorry there's no guest speaker. Don't be so disappointed, because I really do have a passion for excellence. I pray that what we would do would be excellent, and I pray that we would do the best job that we can do. And I have asked a few of you if you felt as though you knew how to do a personal mix. And would you say that in a sense maybe it can be a struggle at times, and it's something that you would appreciate a little bit more information about? Yeah, okay. Well, so listen, I'm not claiming in any way whatsoever to be an authority, but this is a preference formed over years of experience, and I do have that, and it works for me. It works for me. I also took some time to study, and so I was grateful for opportunity to study and look into it and read what other people are doing. There are definitely several schools of thought, and I'm just going to, if I may, I'm just going to pepper you with the information, and we can't talk about all the schools of thought, because I feel like it's not beneficial for our time and what we're trying to do with it. But truly, I'll mention the in-ear mix, and I'll talk about in-ear monitors. I may just say IEM from now. That's in-ear monitor, all right? The IEMs that we use and the mixes that we put together. So from here on out, you'll hear that, IEM. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized what it's supposed to sound like. That's, in a sense, why it's called a personal mix. You hear what I'm saying? But I will give you information that I have taken over years of just using these, and also asking good questions when I'm around people that use them also. There's definitely an improper way of using the IEMs, and it can lead to frustration. It can lead to lack of confidence, and we've all been there, where you're not hearing yourself, so you're not playing confidently. And it's also something that could potentially lead to some hearing damage if you use them, regularly and incorrectly. And so we hope actually that you would view this, what we're doing right now, it's a tool for you to get better, to maybe even control your playing in a better way, because you can hear yourself clearly. And hearing yourself clearly, you'll gain confidence. So this information that I'm going to share is going to come, it's assuming that you know the M48. And so just a a really brief overview. Basically, you all know that this area here, we would say, is the master. You've got your master volume, and everything you touch here is going to affect the whole mix, all right? And so from master volume, then you have your channel volumes, and you guys understand, too, that you've got the kick drum and the worship leader, and however they're laid out. So these are your channel volumes when you've got it on volume, all right? And then from there, you have pan, and now we're affecting the pan. That's the left and right, all right? And where we choose to shift it is going to be in your left ear or your right ear. And then we have the EQ, which honestly, we'll get into that a little later, but this is your EQ band. And the solo buttons, you've probably heard us say, just don't mess with these solo buttons, because a lot of people will end up doing this, and they'll move over to another thing, and they'll go, I don't hear anything but, and then they'll mention it, and we find out that you're soloed. So don't mess with solo unless you know what it is. You're just trying to make sure you hear yourself, or you're picking something out. And then the last thing is the effects. You have a reverb send, and we'll get into that a little bit in a minute. And so that is the overview. You all know this. You should know at least that. If at this point, as I'm moving forward, if you have any questions, I just would say please write them down, and we can go into them at the end, and that would be great. Just to so we can lay the tools before you on the table. It is actually up to you to pick them up and use them. And so here we go. All right? So we've written it out for you in the sense you've got this overall sound experience, all right, as we look into the tools of your mix. The first one is overall sound experience. And CD quality is what I want you to write down. And again, the schools of thought, you can look into it on your own, but just consider the very first thing we talk about is CD quality. Know this, our hearing is actually in 3D. All right, when you see something that's in 3D, you know it's 3D as compared to 2D, right? So our hearing is in 3D. Whatever you hear, whether you like it or not, is in 3D without in-ears. Now put in-ears on, and when you wear the IEMs, it gives us control as to where the sound is and at what time it makes it to our brain. You understand? It reaches our brain at the time we tell it to. You give it, so basically we can limit or eliminate certain sounds that are reaching our brain, and that's where the problem begins. You understand? When you put the IEMs on, it's a mono sound. Everything's right down the middle, and it's not in 3D. So start with that. Consider that we all have an internal mixer. So, for instance, if you're in a crowd of people, depending on how close or far they are, the proximity, you can tune into a certain person. You ever do that at a party or a get-together or something? You can tune in. That's your personal mixer, that internal mixer. You're using it, all right? And so just know that the sound experience we're looking for is to mix it into a CD quality sound. So the IEM headphones, so the next thing is proper wearing of the headphones. So please use both or none. And we've seen some people, they'll drop one. I've done it once in a while because I'm trying to hear what's happening in the church, okay? That's normal for maybe a few minutes, but the truth is the damage to the ear can be made just if you drop one. It's the ear that's wearing it that's going to get damaged, all right? And so well-fitted headphones that we have, you guys all have little sleeves, and we put it on every time when we tell you to put it on and make sure that it is sealed. And so just bear with me. When you put the headphone on, they say, whoever's sure, those guys, but they say to pull your ear up and make sure it seals. So you should be getting a seal. If you haven't yet experienced that, consider next time, try it out. You're supposed to seal, all right? So they tell you to pull this up, put the headphone in, and then let go your ear. That's how you get the seal. And so basically it'll provide isolation. It'll provide safety and precision. And safety from what? From the front of house sound and from stage noise. And so basically that will translate to a lower master volume. Lower volume is a good thing. Consider that. For your ears, it's a good thing, all right? And so next thing I want to mention is, with the in-ears, is wax in the sound holes will cause the sound quality to go down. So the wax from our ears makes it into the sound holes. So listen, I have a practical help. Let's clean our ears before we use them. Now listen, we haven't done this. This is new to us. Y'all are the first to hear it. But we're going to try to encourage people to clean the in-ears after they use them. You know, clean your own wax out. But if you end up showing up and someone didn't clean the wax out, go ahead and clean the in-ears out. So look in, before you put the sleeve onto the in-ear, look in the sound hole, and if there's any wax, just get it out of there, okay? This sounds silly, but it's a practical help. And I'll say practical help on each one of these from this point forward. So now channel volume. Look at channel volume. Having adjusted all of your channel volumes and having gotten your own mix, as you play through the first song at your rehearsal, listen to what it is that you think needs to change. All right? So I'm not going to show you how to change the volume. I believe you guys know that. But having made your first mix, listen to what you think needs to change. And when it comes to volume, rule of thumb, think about more along the lines what you can turn down than what you can turn up. So rule of thumb, draw a little thumb and then put like whatever. But this is a big deal because listen, what happens, we have the tendency to turn up to the point where there's no headroom. What is headroom? Headroom is the space that we have to get to the highest point. If I turn it up and I turn it to where there's no headroom, everything comes up to the no headroom zone. There's nothing you can do about getting a good mix. Okay? That's important, and it seems kind of silly, but if you remember one thing about volume is turn it down instead of turning it up. All right? Look for the things that you can. Otherwise, it'll be so muddy and it'll be so loud, you really can't do anything about that. All right? So a practical help, this is practically, so start with the kick drum, which is, it's number one. And it's actually well placed. It should be the thing that is front and forward in every mix. When you listen to any music at all, the mix itself, you'll recognize the kick drum is prevalent. It is in the front. And so what I mean by in the front is that it should probably be the one that has the most volume comparatively to you, all right? You might be louder. So bring the kick drum up and then mix everything in volume to the kick drum, all right? Allowing for headroom in that way. So then channel panning. What is channel panning? It's creating space and separation. And so the mix, unless it's panned, the mix that you get, unless it's panned, it comes in and remains mono. It's all down the middle. Everything's right down the middle. So all the frequencies, everything right down the middle. And so, and what we want to do right after we get done, listening to this information, we'll have a little demonstration, and I'll show you guys panning and everything. So, but it makes a huge difference. So remember that it triggers. So what happens if it's in mono? It triggers our brains to look for the 3D relief that we're used to. And so what happens is we get fatigued. And so you get ear fatigue, and that's something, not only ear fatigue, you might have, if it's too loud, you might have ringing in your ears, and so just consider that. And then panning in the inputs into a stereo mix, it allows similar sounding instruments to stand out at lower volumes. And so, again, consider this. Low, comfortable volume is a good thing, And so when you pan them, say, similar instruments, electric guitar 1, electric guitar 2. If you send them to, the right side and left side of your hearing, you're separating those very similar sounds. And then you can turn them down. Often you can end up turning them down a little bit. So practical help, and this one's more for the singers, but vocalists can harmonize better when their vocal is right down the middle, and then everyone else is panned relative to where they're standing, okay? And so a vocalist will harmonize better by being right down the middle. So here's another thought. Pan everything relative to where you stand on platform. And for some of us, say you're way off to the right, I see John Colston, he's off to the right. But if he's standing there and he's playing, he still has room in his right ear because he's looking at people that he could say, well, this portion will be to the right of me, this portion to the left. So if you consider where you stand relative, wherever you are, relative to those around you, pan them to where you feel they are, literally positioned on platform. All right? And so now reverb, and I'll mention it's something you should absolutely add last and only if needed. And using reverb to create 3D sound is something that is new to me, that as I was reading through and studying for this, that I actually did get to use on a weekend. So I studied and then I came and did a weekend, and I used some reverb, and it was helpful. All right? But it is to help move the mix from sounding mono to 3D. All right? So see it this way. Panning is positioning. If you see panning as left and right, then consider reverb as setting the depth. If you give it more reverb, if it's wet, it moves back. It moves back. All right? If you remove reverb and it's a dry, it brings it forward. And it's not necessarily it's not necessarily the volume, it's the depth. And that's an interesting thought too, is say you don't have in-ears and you're standing here, and someone from your back right, you can tell they're not only to your right, but they're further back. You understand? So you're going to turn back and look towards them. Reverb creates that depth. It can stay at the same volume. You don't mess with the volume, but it will send it back. Okay? That's another opportunity. If done properly, you can actually turn volume down because you've created depth. You understand? Sweet? Okay. And so, and actually another thought too is mixing in the crowd mics, which we have on number 16. Mixing in crowd mics can also help. And I don't know if you, Garrison, if you guys have crowd mics in your room, there is an ambient mic on the back of this that also creates, the feeling of 3D. Whether you like it or not, you look for 3D. You will be fatigued if you don't get it. And so for those of us that do a whole weekend, sometimes you're like, dude, I'm so tired, or I'm just, and we don't realize it, but we look for 3D sound. So so the crowd mics is something that will help you create the 3D sound as well. And so it kind of takes away the feeling of isolation that we have when we have in-ears on. It helps to take that away. And so the last thing, number 6, is the master volume. In the master volume, so this is of the complete mix. Once the mix is done, the master volume will affect everything you've done and bring it up or down. So first thought is guard your ears. Know not to have it so loud and that it's just blaring. At each session, when you come to rehearsal, I would feel it is best to make sure it's turned down. We've all experienced, I don't know that we all have, but where somebody turns metronome on, and from the last time our master volume's turned up, and you get the you want to scream, you know? And so a good rule of thumb there too is just to start with a lower master volume. And we've all, experienced having our mix saved. I believe we have. I'm not sure if some of the new people. But then you bring it up to where you're normally used to, your master volume. And so the IEMs are more sensitive than the normal headphones or the normal speakers. And for that reason, the traditional ones may not sound as good if you try to plug them into this. But protect your ears. Don't mess with this master volume once you've gotten into rehearsal. Try not to mess with it too much. A practical help for those of us that have the wireless pack is make sure our master volume ends up being line out. Make sure you use your master volume on your pack to just minute adjustments. So if you've used a pack, you can end up you turn it up here, and you're turning the whole thing up. So just remember that. And so back to EQ. Last thing on this. The EQ, I use it sparingly, but I use it to separate frequencies or get rid of frequencies I don't want. I would say to us, we're not professionals. We probably will never be. So just keep it flat. In other words, keep it at 0. Don't mess with EQ. And again, looking into, why you should do that, because it's just more manageable. And what we get that comes into our ears, if you get good enough or you feel like there's a certain frequency that's hurtful or that you don't like, then you can cut it. But don't mess with EQ. So I don't know if you've gotten into that. And so now, I just want to take a couple minutes and show you guys, just demonstrate it. Tony has been able to track our weekend services where we're all separate channels. So he's going to run some music, and I just want to walk through with you all. There's so much more that can happen. I just want to touch on what it is that we just talked about. So what you're going to hear is my personal mix. And I just want to walk through it with you all. And hopefully where you're sitting, and that's what we're saying, try to stay in the middle, and hopefully you'll hear what I'm talking about. But Tony, if you want to just play that. And I think I'm going to use my own rule. I'm going to turn down the line coming in so we don't get blown out. And then when it starts showing up, So the first thing is he's getting it prepped. I'm going to talk about the overall sound. This is what the sound I have in my ears. It's going to sound different to you because you're sitting and you've got this atmosphere. You're listening to a 3D sound. But just practically, I want to show you all, not only show you, but you can hear it, what I'm talking about when I mention the CD sound, the CD quality. And so, is that the... Okay. So Everbeat, here we go. Familiar. So I'm just going to start. I'm going to take my acoustic guitar, and I'm going to show you. So if I put it right now, I'd put it into my right ear. If I don't want that, I want it on my left because that's where I'm at. I'm going to turn it to the left. So I'm literally just panning my acoustic from right to left. All right? Personally, I feel like whatever instrument you play, you should have down the middle. All right? So in the mix, I've panned. I'm going to show you all. So right now, the vocals. In my mix, I've panned. I am down the middle. This is me. And then this is background 1 because she stands to my right. And then background 2 and background 3 you can see this, she's panned slightly because she stands nearest to me, and then she is panned further away because she's farther than me. So I can pick out who's singing what because I know where you're standing, all right? So that's really important. I also have the click track off to the right, and I'm going to show you, I've got it turned down relative to everything else. Click track is there for us to pick out when we need it. Most of the time it's the drummer. He needs to keep us on time. Well, you need to know the time, all right? And so moving from the overall CD quality, just move into the channel volume. Right now I can tell you that the bass guitar isn't as loud as what I usually hear in my ears. I'm just gonna solo it. And so I'll just show you, somehow in the mix, when we recorded it, it just sounds a little lower. But come back to maybe the kick drum. So I'm gonna try to get my volumes. I'm gonna have my kick drum beat up front, very present, and I'm gonna bring my volumes up to the kick drum. All right? And then the channel panning, as I already showed you. So practically channel panning. This is me. Just consider I'm an acoustic, so I'm playing right down the middle. I've got electric one who's off to my right, and so he's panned to the right, and then electric 2 is panned to my left. Everybody got that? So really simple, but it creates the separation that we look for. All right? I'm going to turn it up just a little bit, and I'm going to move to reverb on the, she's going to be singing it here. I'm going to show you the reverb. Right now, there's nothing on here. Oh, here's what I'm doing. I'm soloing the wrong thing right here. So, practical help for reverb, how to set your reverb. Turn it all the way up until you can hear it. Hear the difference? Yes. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it down until it blends in. I can barely hear it. With that, I'm going to turn everything else on. In my ears, that sounds more than you know. So this is full. I'll never go full. Back it down to where you barely hear it and it blends in. So there's my master volume. So as you work on your personal mix, consider again what you can turn down. What I did, and I don't think I mentioned it, when I set the reverb, I went to the volume and I turned her down slightly. Because it's interesting what'll happen is you start to pan things to left and right. You can actually go back and just touch the volume and back it off just slightly. Now, overall volume, I like to feel like I'm in the music. I personally, over the years of leading, I like to feel like I'm in the music. And I see Timmy's shaking his head, and I don't know if others would agree, but there's something about feeling like you're in the music. It is not all about just volume. It's about all these other little things. So, any questions on this first part? Any thoughts? Anything I may have missed? Any standouts? So as a newbie, how do you have time to do this while you're in rehearsal, right? And so, yeah, over time, as you ask Tony to save your mix, you'll always start where you left off. This is definitely something that will get better over time. But interestingly, I talked to somebody in the back. I apologize it took us this long to even have this conversation. We've gotten... The first things were Avioms, and then we got M48s, and we just keep moving. You guys show up, and you're like, all right, cool. That's awesome. We're like, just mix it, man. You got it. So I apologize, but in a sense, I'm learning too. I'm a student, and I'm learning as well. And I'll tell you that over time, it will get better. And so I would answer to you in this way. One of the things I do is on the first song, we call it Get the Cobwebs Out. I don't even really worry about how I sound and all. I'm listening for everything as far as the mix. Because one thing that we have in common, all of us, is we play with different people all the time. One's electric, one's bass, lower. It just depends. And so good question. I would say use and listen, I tried to make the tools as simple. There's so much more, but I believe if you start with this, that you'll get to a point where you feel like you have a good personal mix. So, David.
You did the reverb. That's just for that one channel? It's not global?
Just for the one channel. Just for the one channel reverb. So good question. He's asking about reverb. So you see I've got reverb send. This has to be on. My reverb has to be on. And I am now looking at, and you can see I've already done this because I've put reverb on everybody, and it's just about the same spot. I think mine will tweak a little bit. But if you don't have the reverb button on, you will not hear it. And the reverb send either. So this is basically just like the pan and the volume. When you touch this, you're messing with, now you're affecting the reverb on the channel you want it to be affected. Sweet. Nathan.
When it comes to reverb, in my experience, for what it's worth, I almost never, well, I don't almost never, I flat out never apply any reverb to a lower frequency instrument.
It's a good thought.
All that washiness that you get out of it, it just muddies things up, and you lose a lot of clarity that way. So
Good thought.
I typically only, it's like vocals and maybe acoustic guitar are the only things I'll ever.
So let me just repeat that. But basically, Nathan's just saying, and I think it's a great point, is to never really, if you're going to add reverb, don't ever add it to any lower register instruments because it just gets muddy. It'll just add to the muddiness. We're looking for clarity, we're looking for separation, and we're looking for depth. So we want a 3D sound, but we want it to be clear. And so that is a good point. Reverb, most of the time it's going to be vocals and maybe a little bit of acoustic, but that's probably more for the acoustic player. Casey?
I sometimes be more, like feel the music more. I add some reverb to the snare sometimes.
Reverb on the snare. Okay. So Casey adds a little reverb on the snare once in a while. So sweet. So any other questions about what we talked through right there? Steve?
As far as storing your settings and all that,
Yep.
I know initially we were told to save our own, and now I think Tony's doing all of that. Does it matter if, like, this past Sunday I played and I changed a few of my settings? Would it hurt if I saved my own settings and then he resaves it, or how does that?
So the question is in saving and recalling, does it hurt if he saves and stores his own mix? And I feel like the answer to that, Tony, is we've had a lot of people attempt to do it and they don't do it properly, and it saves to a different number.
That's what I was going to say.
And
if you do it correctly, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. But just know that I save them after every single service. Every time, without fail, I save them after every single service. So just have confidence in knowing that I got you. You know what I mean? And I recall, just like before every rehearsal, I recall everybody's numbers, so when you walk in, boom, you're ready to go. That's one thing I do. Before I turn my board off, I save everything.
Sweet. So just to show you guys, basically, if I hit store, the one that is not blinking is the one that I'm on. And so I know that, okay, 1 through 8, so I'm on 5. So Tony took my mix and copied it over to 5 for this box. So not to get into too many details, but the thing is we have all these boxes, and for Christmas and Easter, sometimes he has to save this mix to this mix. He's the master of the numbers that go to every box. And so it's probably best that you just don't try to store or recall. Those of us that used to do it, I ask Tony, I make sure I don't touch it. And so if anything, you could always just say, hey, Tony, can you save my mix? I'm feeling like there's a squirrel running around inside there, and I don't want it to bite something.
For peace of mind, if you want to remind me, please feel free to.
Sweet.